Thank you, Tom. It's great to sort of always be at your home institution and doing this sort of thing. And in that spirit, my newest book, My Paris Year, which just came out actually this month, which just wouldn't have happened if I hadn't been at Georgia Tech. I worked on a digital poetry project with my colleague Jay Bolter in the Wesley Center for New Media here, and a colleague of ours from Sweden, Maria Engberg, which took us to Paris in 2007. And this book grew out of that, and something else that grew out of that was a second digital poetry project that I worked on with, at that time, an undergraduate. She's now in our graduate program, Jennifer Vandegrift, who's sitting out there in the audience. And she did this project as part of the Presidential Undergraduate Research Award program here. And I promised her when she worked on it that she'd get a real showing of it. And it's actually the prologue poem to My Paris Year. And so I'm going to show that first, and then I'm going to read from the collection.
Natasha may be a cliché. Black trench coat, sunglasses, painted horses that gallop the length of an orange scarf under the tail of her hair. She shows no sense of urgency, yet seems intent on a destination. I catch a glimpse of her, just a reflection in a shop window near the Arène de Lutèce on Rue Monge. Herself another kind of ruin, an indescribable geometry, no angle unambiguous. But behind the facade is a theorem that without her, I cannot prove.
I spend an inordinate amount of time here wondering how our students do the things that they do. They are amazing. And it is a pleasure to be able to work with them. So thank you, Jennifer. As I said, this collection came out of being in Paris. It just so happened that I turned 40 that year, and it seemed like an important milestone. And so I don't think that many of the poems require much explanation. So I'm just going to read a few of them, and then I'm going to end by reading a couple from the new collection that's coming out in June, which is called Sassing, which is a little bit more reflective of my southern heritage. I'm actually a native Atlantan. We're kind of rare these days. So you'll get Paris and Atlanta all in one night. My Paris Year de. Paris is vertigo. Giddy my first night, I rushed headlong to marvel at the lights, chasing up and down the Eiffel Tower, rocking side to side on Seine riverboats, swirling round the Luxembourg Pond. No wonder I found myself engulfed after hanging my head in the hotel tub to wash the sensation, the awe, the cafe smoke from my hair. My equilibrium shaken, no way to right myself, no way to stop the inevitable but necessary purge. By morning, what I brought with me has been eradicated. Day 2 is different. I sit on the balcony, watch a tourist unload baggage, nibble a warm baguette. Fixtures. At Place de Clichy Station, a stranger held a porcelain double sink balanced on his right shoulder, fingers warped by the installation grooves, tunnel light pouring through the drain. I want to believe he is on his way to Centre Pompidou to join Duchamp, a ghost perched on his own unchiseled sculpture. At midnight, I sit in a cafe with the woman who tells me she will steal away my story, now her own, fashion another piece of art from these words I have spilled while emptying our pitcher, the same wine flowing through us, soon just apparitions on the metro. My Paris sur toi. Bruce Willis held the door for me at Chanel, a story that should stand on its own merits, or lack thereof, except that later at dinner, after I regale everyone with my famous person's story, Martina begins to discuss the beauty of Notre Dame, the church, not the woman. Except it really is about the woman, because what we are questioning is spirituality itself. And I say, even a self-professed atheist should be moved. But Andrew hears even a sock-wearing atheist, and we laugh, except that there's an air of something unsaid, something perhaps about what it means to be moved. So Jay and Maria make a joke about Coq au vin always sounding pornographic, which we all agree, not being French, is appropriately French, except Coq is cock in our language, the American sound being a large part of what seems illicit, which isn't the same as explicit, something we are all trying to be but failing to do. Particularly exceptional when you consider that words are our vocation. If this were 1 century earlier, the men would escort us to our hotel, leave us alone with our prayers, head for Montmartre's Cabaret du Noir, hold the door open for sin. Instead, I order another round of Kir, thrust my right pinky into the candle flame, shake loose my hair, find any temptation entirely my own. I will say this about this poem. I'm sort of obsessed with the J. Peterman catalog, which if any of you have ever actually seen the J. Peterman catalog, it's full of things that no one really needs. But what's amusing about the J. Peterman catalog is the descriptions of the things in the J. Peterman catalog, the little stories that go along with it. And so this actually has an epigraph from the J. Peterman catalog, and it's called Marie Antoinette Nightshirt, number 1019, price $39. Epigraph. No lace, no embroidery, no gewgaws, pure Pima cotton, the best there is. French, white, crisp, innocent, 4-button placket, band collar, shirt tail hem, sleep in it, walk along beaches in it, visit a secluded meadow in it. J. Peterman. The catalog copy was alluring, the price reasonable enough for a 23-year-old with seduction on her mind. Innocent, maybe. Back then, I wasn't confident enough to use the simple things in my favor. Instead, I should have splurged, bought a pink lace negligee that would have clung perfectly to the curves of my body. Shirt-tail hems, I would learn, look better in the morning when, wearing only Oxford cloth button-down, I let my lover make breakfast, in a reality where I traded fairy tale for sang-froid. 17 years ago, I was pretending a kind of sensual simplicity. Of course it failed me, just as Versailles failed Marie. And politics aside, don't we all wish she'd had more time for the fantasy that might have been her life? So, as I said, I also spend a fair amount of time thinking about Southern poetry and looking for Southern poetry, and there's a very famous bookstore in Paris called Shakespeare and Company, and I was in there and, of course, looking, as I always am, for Southern poetry. This is called On Finding Southern Poetry in Paris. Since my friend is so much taller, I focus on the lower shelves, the poetry section only a cramped corner, a surprise since Shakespeare and Company is renowned for its writers, so many of them poets. I had expected to find more than the customary single column. As always, I look for Southern poetry. In M's, I scan for Maddox, Everett, hope to find his rare songbook. Instead, I discover a thin volume from Miller, apropos when I remember that Paris is also a city in Texas, and devoutly Catholic Vassar would probably have liked the view of Notre Dame framed by modernist books stacked either side of the shop entrance. For €3, I get the famous Ex Libris inside the faded front cover, And beside a fountain, I wait for friends to make final purchases before dinner, scratch a quick note home to say, despite French penchants, I'm still right with my raisin. I know that months later, if I can sleep deeply enough, my dreams will bring me back here. Which seems like a good way to take you into just a few of the Southern poems. The prologue poem for that collection, Sassing, mentions someone named Hester. Hester was my great-great-grandmother, and she was a Cherokee Indian who was stolen when she was a little girl by my great-great-grandfather. And one of the things that's most interesting about her is they changed her name when she was a little girl, and so she lost her Cherokee name. She never could remember what it was, which I always thought was very sad. And so this is actually in her voice, and it's called Hester Speaks. Listen, child, to what you imagine I know, to the memories you do not have. Me lying beside Setting Down Creek before the cotton mill's wheel began churning the water, before the white man stole me from the past and built the covered bridge, before I was old enough to know my Cherokee name, formed from dancing spirits that call me on the wind. 2. Even without memory, I knew I should never cut my hair, so I grew it past the hips that birthed a line to you, kept it in 2 tight braids I would tie together across my waist, the ends hanging loose between my legs, thickly woven, separate lives. 3. I do not remember how I learned to dance, a cup and saucer filled with well water balanced on my head, how I managed not to spill anything, why I did it the first time, why I continued. 4. My Christian name was a mistake, a misspelling of Esther, another foreign bride. She knew her real name. Hadassah was careful about revealing herself, but had memories, choices. I did not marry a king, could not save my people. 5. When you dance, child, do you feel me? I've watched you spin wildly, unafraid, unashamed, unaware it is me you hear, my cup tipping over, whispering a new name for the rhythms you cannot resist. So there are a number of, in the Sassing collection, there are a number of themes, but one of them is that I took titles from really famous poems written by Southern male poets, because for a very long time, all the poets who published who were Southern were in fact male. My dissertation is actually sort of deals with the issue of why there don't seem to be many women. And I didn't want to say that they were wrong, because they weren't wrong. I just wanted to say that if I actually wrote it, that it might be different. And so this is actually a takeoff of James Dickey's very famous poem, Mayday Sermon to the Women of Gilmer County, Georgia, from a woman preacher leaving the Baptist church. That's the whole long title. And I apologize for my singing voice. I will sing a tiny bit. And my poem is called Mayday Sermon, straight up. What you probably ought to know about the Dickey poem is it's about a young woman whose father finds her messing around with an itinerant motorcycle rider, and he strings her up in the barn, beats her half to death, and when she finally gets free, she kills him, and then she rides off naked into the night on a motorcycle with the guy. So, you know, the kind of thing that happens all the time. So, at least in Gilmer County, I don't know. So, I'm from up in those parts, my mom's family, so. It starts with an epigraph from the original poem, which is, "Listen, O daughters, turn, turn." No, not May. Not hot enough for fiery conversions. It was late July, the smell of chicken houses drifting through the open windows, the church piano string-stressed atonal, popsicle stick advertising fans flapping off beat, one side Christ night cool and in the shade of Gethsemane, the other side the new porch at Ingram's funeral parlor. It was a Friday, and I was just days short of 16. His name was Bobby, and he would leave in another year off to engineering school, his mind always full of pure science. But tonight, his curiosity had excited my mama into believing that there might finally be a good Christian boy in my future. It would only be a matter of weeks before a future film student would come back from Texas, the summer with his father, full of mystery beyond anything I'd found in church, complete with his jazz shoes that made everybody think he was gay. I would choose him over Bobby for my homecoming date, and his car would break down and we wouldn't get our photo made at the dance, and after I drove him home in my mother's car, he would ask if I wanted to fool around, and I would say no. A few years later, we'd have the same conversation, and he would show me in his journal where he wrote that he dreamed I was on fire, and the entry would be on the same day my ex-husband doused me with developing fluid, and again, I would say no. So here I was with Bobby in a whitewashed clapboard country church during summer revival, and the three preachers had been at it for hours, and everybody was singing, "Just as I am without one plea." And the preacher was waving his arms in the air and bellowing, "Come, sinner, come home." And that's when it happened. Wanda, a church matron, spied Bobby and made a beeline for him. "Boy, do you know the Lord Jesus Christ is your eternal Savior?" Bobby glanced over his shoulder, and I tried to say, "Run!" The next thing I knew, he was up front, down on his knees, and I couldn't get near him because there was a circle of folks praying over him. All I could think was, "Get me out of here." I wanted to scream, "He's a Unitarian!" But I choked on an old-time silence. All I could feel was my own baptism in the mossy concrete pool out back of the church, filled every summer by the local fire department, Brother Morgan pushing me under, my dress pinned between my legs so it wouldn't float up. Then the preacher hollered at Bobby, "Give your heart over to the Lord, son." Eventually they gave up when Bobby couldn't see what they wanted him to see, and when we drove home he laughed, but I just wanted to cry. We fooled around for a few weeks, but it never got past third, and then I dumped him out of pure shame. Brother Jim, you know damn well there ain't any women preachers in Gilmer County, and even if there were, they wouldn't have to warn young women about lust and murder and riding off into the night naked on a motorcycle, man between their knees. Because that night, late in July, during my 16th year, I was just one county over, just a few years past my own drowning and the new dry dress for the photos, and I could tell you then what I know now for sure. You don't need your daddy to string you up in a barn and beat the sin out of you, because the sin swirls like a tornado from the moment you gasp into this world. And the only thing that separates men and women is that the women know that neither love nor God can save you from some things. And I'm going to end with a very short piece. Poets like to write their own epigraphs and anything else we can get away with, or epitaphs, I should say. Epigraphs too. I've made a few of those up. So this one is a poem that I wrote about how I want my remains to be dressed, because that's important to me. Instructions for my burial clothes. Sometimes I dream Dolly Parton is my aunt. I'm about 12. She comes to visit at Easter, brings me chocolates, jelly beans, and makeup. My mother frowns, hurries around the kitchen with the other female relatives. They are all wearing sackcloth. Dolly sits beside me, plays a guitar, and sings. Her long, red, glittered nails click against the frets. When I say, "Do not bury me in a suit, I want to go out in sequins," my mother shakes her head, wonders where I learned such excess. Thank you very much.